She never knew he was a billionaire. For 8 months, Naomi Taylor had been dating a man named Marcus, a quiet, thoughtful systems analyst who worked modest hours, drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic, and lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn. He was kind, attentive, genuinely interested in her dreams of becoming a civil rights attorney. He listened when she talked about her cases at the nonprofit legal aid clinic. He celebrated her small victories and encouraged her through the exhausting work of defending people the system had abandoned. Marcus was everything Naomi had been looking for: authentic, grounded, present. What Naomi didn't know was that Marcus Richardson was worth $3.2 billion. The modest apartment was actually a penthouse he designed to look unremarkable from the outside. The old Honda was a choice, not a necessity. The systems analyst's job was technically true. He analyzed systems of inequality and invested his wealth in dismantling them. But he kept all of it hidden because he'd learned something painful about visibility. When people know you're wealthy, they stop seeing you and start seeing what you represent. Marcus had made his fortune through a combination of strategic investments and a revolutionary fintech platform that had democratized access to capital for underbanked communities. He'd sold that company at 31, disappeared from public view, and spent the next 7 years investing his wealth in overlooked opportunities while living deliberately below his means. Not out of shame about his success, but out of desire to be known for who he was rather than what he owned. He'd met Naomi at a community forum about criminal justice reform. She'd been presenting a case study about a client, a single mother arrested for a crime she didn't commit, facing years in prison because she couldn't afford bail. Naomi had fought for 3 months to get the charges dismissed, working unpaid overtime while juggling student loan debt and the constant exhaustion of caring deeply about work that barely paid her rent. Marcus had watched her present with absolute clarity and moral conviction, and something had shifted in him. This was someone who measured success by impact rather than income. Someone who'd chosen a career path that guaranteed financial struggle because the work mattered more than the money. Someone whose character was visible in every decision she made. He'd approached her after the forum, introduced himself simply as Marcus, and asked if she'd like to grab coffee to discuss the case. That coffee had become dinner. Dinner had become a second date, and slowly, carefully, they'd built something real, a relationship based on genuine connection rather than status or transaction. But Marcus had made a deliberate choice not to reveal his wealth. Not yet. He needed to know that what they were building was authentic, that Naomi was connecting with him rather than the life he could offer. He'd been burned before, relationships that seemed genuine until his wealth became known, partners whose affection shifted from organic to calculated the moment they understood his net worth. So he'd maintained a modest persona. When Naomi suggested inexpensive restaurants, he agreed enthusiastically. When she insisted on splitting bills because she valued equality in relationships, he respected it. When she talked about her financial stress, student loans, rent increases, the constant calculation of which bills to pay first, he listened without offering to solve her problems, understanding that unsolicited rescue often feels like pity rather than support. But 8 months into their relationship, something had happened that forced Marcus to reconsider his invisibility. Naomi had taken on a case that was attracting dangerous attention. She was representing a coalition of tenants facing illegal eviction from a building owned by a powerful real estate developer named Victor Castellano. Victor was politically connected, legally ruthless, and willing to use intimidation to get what he wanted. Naomi had received threatening messages. Her car had been vandalized. Someone had followed her home from work. When she'd reported to police, they'd been dismissive, suggesting she was overreacting and that defending difficult clients came with risks she should have anticipated. The message was clear. Powerful people could harass her with impunity. Marcus had watched Naomi's fear grow. She was trying to hide it, trying to maintain her professional composure, but he saw the way her hands shook when her phone buzzed with unknown numbers. He saw the exhaustion in her face from not sleeping, from constantly looking over her shoulder. He saw her determination not to abandon her clients even as the threats escalated. That's when Marcus realized his invisibility had become a luxury he could no longer afford. Naomi needed protection, resources, and access to power that could match Victor's influence. But revealing his wealth would fundamentally change their relationship. She might feel deceived. She might question whether anything between them had been real. She might see him differently, not as Marcus the person, but as Marcus the billionaire. But her safety mattered more than his comfort. So Marcus had made a decision. He would reveal his identity, deploy his resources to protect her and her clients, and accept whatever consequences came to their relationship. Because love isn't just about connection. It's about showing up when it costs something to do so. The revelation was planned for tomorrow. Marcus had arranged a meeting between Naomi, her clients, and someone he described as a potential ally with resources to help. What Naomi didn't know was that the ally was him, that the resources were his, that the modest systems analyst she'd been dating was actually one of the wealthiest black men in the country, with enough influence to make Victor Castellano's harassment not just stop, but backfire spectacularly. Tonight, they were having dinner at their favorite inexpensive Thai restaurant. Naomi was exhausted but trying to hide it, talking about her case with the same passion and conviction she always brought to her work. Marcus was listening, memorizing every detail, preparing for tomorrow's revelation and whatever would mean for everything they'd built together. "I know this is stressful," Naomi said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Thank you for being patient with me while I deal with all this. I promise things will calm down once this case is resolved." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to apologize for caring about justice. That's who you are. It's one of the things I love most about you." Naomi smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm being stupid. Fighting battles I can't win against people with unlimited resources. Maybe I should just focus on cases where I actually have a chance." "You have more resources than you know," Marcus said quietly. "Tomorrow, I'm going to show you something. I need you to trust me." Naomi looked confused but nodded. "Okay, what is it?" "Something that changes everything," Marcus said. "But I promise, it changes things in the way you need right now. If you're drawn to stories about hidden power, genuine love, and the moment when truth transforms everything, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, when Marcus reveals who he really is, it won't just protect Naomi. It will expose Victor, Castellano's corruption, deliver justice to families facing illegal eviction, and test whether love built on authenticity can survive the revelation of wealth that was hidden to protect it. Marcus's journey to intentional invisibility had started with painful visibility. 8 years ago, when his fintech company had sold for $2.8 billion, the media attention had been overwhelming. Young black tech billionaire became his identity rather than his name. Investment opportunities flooded in, not because people believed in his vision, but because association with his success seemed profitable. Romantic interests multiplied. People who'd never noticed him suddenly fascinated by his company. The breaking point had come with someone named Vanessa. They dated for 6 months after his company sold. She'd been attentive, supportive, seemingly genuine. Marcus had started imagining a future together. Then he'd overheard a phone conversation. Vanessa talking to her friend about securing their relationship before Marcus moved on to someone younger. She'd been strategizing their connection like a business transaction, calculating the optimal timing to suggest moving in together, planning how to position herself for maximum financial benefit if things didn't work out. Marcus had ended the relationship that day. But more importantly, he'd made a decision. He would disappear from public view, live modestly, and only reveal his wealth when absolutely necessary. He needed to know that the next person he loved would be connecting with him. Marcus the person, not Marcus the billionaire. He'd restructured his life carefully. The Brooklyn apartment looked modest on the outside, but was actually a penthouse he designed with hidden luxury, soundproofing, security systems, technology infrastructure that rivaled corporate headquarters. The old Honda was mechanically perfect, maintained by specialists, but deliberately unremarkable. His wardrobe was simple. His lifestyle was deliberately unglamorous. He'd taken a job as a systems analyst at a nonprofit think tank studying economic inequality. It wasn't fake. He actually did the work, contributing research and analysis. But it was also strategic cover that allowed him to remain invisible while understanding the challenges facing the communities his wealth could serve. Meeting Naomi had been different from the beginning. at that community forum on criminal justice reform. He'd watched her present with such clarity and conviction that he'd recognized something rare, someone whose values weren't performative. She wasn't speaking about justice to build a brand or advance a career. She was speaking about justice because she genuinely believed that people deserve dignity regardless of their circumstances. Their first coffee conversation had lasted 3 hours. Naomi had talked about her path to legal aid work, how she'd grown up in Atlanta watching her father, a mechanic, get exploited by predatory lenders who'd eventually taken their house, how she'd sworn she'd become the kind of lawyer who fought for people like her father rather than the institutions that profited from their desperation, how she'd turned down six-figure corporate law offers to work at a nonprofit earning $48,000 annually because the work mattered more than the salary. Marcus had listened and recognized something profound. Naomi had made the opposite choice from most people. She'd sacrificed financial security for moral clarity. That kind of character was exactly what he'd been searching for. But he'd also made a strategic decision. He would test whether their connection could survive without the distortion of wealth, not through elaborate schemes, but through simple honesty about who he was within the constraints of his modest persona. Test one had been financial values. During their third date, they'd talked about money, how they thought about it, what it meant to them, how they made financial decisions. Naomi had been refreshingly direct. I'm bad at saving because I keep giving money to clients who need it more than I do. I know that's financially irresponsible, but I can't watch people suffer when I have $20 that could help. Marcus had recognized something crucial in that admission. Naomi measured wealth by what it could do for others rather than what it could do for her. She wasn't financially struggling because of irresponsibility. She was struggling because she chose compassion over accumulation. Test 2 had been about status. Marcus had introduced Naomi to some of his friends, deliberately choosing people across different economic backgrounds. When they'd had dinner with his friend James, a teacher earning $55,000 annually, and his friend Patricia, a surgeon earning $400,000, Naomi had engaged with both identically. She'd been just as interested in James's perspective on education reform as Patricia's views on healthcare policy. Status didn't change how she treated people. Test 3 had been about ambition. Marcus had asked Naomi about her career goals, expecting to hear about partnership tracks or judicial appointments. Instead, she'd said, I want to build a legal aid clinic that's actually sustainable. Most nonprofits burn through young lawyers in 3 years because the work is so exhausting and the pay is so low. I want to create something that pays people fairly, provides mental health support, and doesn't require martyrdom to pursue justice. Marcus had recognized the sophistication of that vision. Naomi wasn't just idealistic. She was strategic. She understood that sustainable justice required sustainable systems. That insight demonstrated both moral clarity and practical intelligence. Test 4 had been about honesty. During a vulnerable conversation about past relationships, Marcus had admitted that he'd been hurt by someone who'd viewed him transactionally. He'd been deliberately vague about the specifics, but he wanted to see how Naomi responded to the theme. Her response had been immediate. That's awful. People shouldn't be reduced to what they can provide. You deserve to be valued for who you are. She'd meant it. Marcus could see the genuine empathy in her expression, the anger at the injustice he'd experienced. This wasn't performative compassion. It was authentic moral response. Test 5 had been unintentional but revealing. They'd been walking through Brooklyn when a homeless man had approached asking for money. Marcus had given him $20. The man had been surprised, grateful. Naomi had stopped, asked his name, Robert, talked to him for 10 minutes about his situation, then given him her card. If you need legal help, housing issues, benefit applications, anything, call me. No charge. Marcus had watched that interaction and understood something profound. Naomi's compassion wasn't selective. She didn't reserve her humanity for people she knew or people who could reciprocate. She simply treated everyone with dignity. That consistency of character was exactly what Marcus believed mattered most. But now, 8 months into their relationship, the tests had become complicated by real danger. Victor Castellano, the real estate developer, wasn't just threatening Naomi professionally. He was threatening her physically. The harassment had escalated from hostile messages to vandalism to what appeared to be surveillance. Marcus had used his resources to investigate Victor quietly. What he discovered was disturbing. Victor had a pattern of intimidating tenants and lawyers who challenged his illegal practices. He'd faced complaints before, but his political connections and expensive attorneys had always protected him. He operated with impunity because he believed his wealth made him untouchable. Marcus had also discovered something else. Victor's company was financially vulnerable. The building where Naomi's clients lived was leveraged heavily, dependent on refinancing agreements that could be disrupted. Victor had been cutting corners on safety and maintenance to maximize profit, creating violations that could trigger regulatory action. His empire looked powerful, but was actually fragile. It just needed someone with enough resources and determination to apply pressure. Marcus had spent the past 2 weeks positioning his assets strategically. Through a network of investment vehicles and legal entities, he'd quietly acquired debt associated with Victor's properties. He'd documented building code violations and prepared complaints for regulatory agencies. He'd identified Victor's political supporters and funded opposition candidates in upcoming elections. He'd built a comprehensive strategy to not just stop Victor's harassment of Naomi, but to dismantle his ability to harm anyone else. But deploying these resources required revealing himself. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just about introducing an ally. It was about Marcus stepping out of invisibility and accepting whatever consequences came to their relationship. The night before the revelation, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept replaying scenarios. Naomi feeling betrayed by his deception. Naomi questioning whether their relationship had been authentic. Naomi seeing him differently, not as Marcus the person, but as Marcus the billionaire. He'd built their entire relationship on honest emotional connection, while hiding a truth that would fundamentally change how she understood him. But he also knew that protecting Naomi mattered more than protecting his comfort. Love wasn't just about building connection. It was about showing up with whatever resources you had when someone you care about faced danger. His invisibility had been a luxury that served his need to be known authentically, but maintaining it while Naomi faced threats would be selfishness disguised as principle. At 6 a.m., Marcus sent Naomi a message. The meeting today is at 2 p.m. Address is 47 West 43rd Street, 38th floor. Bring your clients and all case documentation. This person can help, but you need to trust me. Naomi responded immediately. Okay, Marcus, what's going on? You're being mysterious. I know, Marcus replied. I promise everything will make sense this afternoon. I love you. I love you too, Naomi wrote back. See you at 2. Marcus looked at those words, I love you too, and wondered if she'd still mean them in 8 hours. If their relationship could survive the revelation that he'd been hiding wealth while watching her struggle financially. If love built on authenticity could survive the disclosure that authenticity had come with significant omission. By 1:30 p.m., Marcus was in the conference room of his private office tower, a building Naomi had never known he owned. His attorney, his head of security, and his chief investment officer were present, prepared to brief Naomi and her clients on the comprehensive strategy to protect them and deliver justice. At 1:55 p.m., Naomi arrived with her clients, 3 families facing illegal eviction, carrying filed boxes of documentation, looking exhausted and hopeful. They'd been told they were meeting a potential ally. They had no idea they were about to meet one of the wealthiest black men in the country who'd been dating their attorney in disguise for 8 months. Marcus took a deep breath. The revelation was about to begin, and everything, their relationship, her safety, the fight for justice, was about to transform in ways neither of them could fully anticipate. When Naomi walked into the conference room, her first reaction was confusion. The space was too elegant. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, minimalist luxury furniture, technology that suggested serious wealth. This didn't match her mental image of a nonprofit ally's office. This looked like corporate power. Her second reaction was recognition. Marcus was standing at the head of the conference table, but he looked different. He was wearing an expensive tailored suit instead of his usual casual clothes. His posture was different, more formal, more commanding. And around him were people who clearly worked for him, an attorney, a security specialist, an investment officer. Marcus. Naomi's voice was uncertain. What is this? Marcus gestured to the chairs. Please, sit down. All of you, I owe you an explanation. Naomi's clients, Teresa, Carlos, and Janice, sat down nervously. Naomi remained standing, her confusion shifting to something that looked like concern. For the past 8 months, Marcus began, looking directly at Naomi, I've been living with intentional invisibility. I told you I was a systems analyst. That's technically true. I analyze systems of inequality and invest in dismantling them. But I wasn't honest about the scale of those investments or the resources I have access to. He clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on the screen. The first slide showed a corporate structure, Marcus Richardson Holdings, with subsidiaries spanning real estate, technology, financial services, and social impact investments. My name is Marcus Richardson. 8 years ago, I founded a fintech company that revolutionized access to capital for underbanked communities. I sold that company for $2.8 billion. Since then, I've been investing in overlooked opportunities and living deliberately below my means because I needed to understand who I was outside the distortion of wealth. Naomi's hand went to her mouth. Her client stared in shocked silence. I met you, Marcus continued, his eyes on Naomi, at that community forum. I watched you present with such moral clarity and genuine commitment to justice that I recognized something rare. Someone whose values weren't performative. Someone who'd sacrificed financial security for moral purpose. Someone I wanted to know as a person rather than as a potential relationship transaction. You lied to me, Naomi said quietly. Her voice was shaking. Not with anger yet, but with the shock of foundational assumptions being shattered. I lived modestly, Marcus corrected gently. I never claimed to be struggling financially. I just didn't volunteer information about wealth because I needed to know that what we were building was authentic. That you were connecting with me, Marcus the person, not Marcus the billionaire. That's not authenticity, Naomi said, her voice growing stronger. That's deception. I told you about my student loans, my financial stress, my constant anxiety about making rent. And you just listened without mentioning that you could solve all of that with one check. Yes, Marcus said, because solving your problems without being asked for felt like pity rather than partnership. And because our relationship needed to be built on mutual respect rather than financial rescue. You chose legal aid work knowing it would be financially difficult. That choice revealed your character. I didn't want to erase that choice by imposing solutions you hadn't requested. Naomi was processing, her legal mind working through the implications. How long were you planning to keep this secret? Until you were in danger, Marcus replied. I was waiting for the right moment to reveal myself gradually, in a way that wouldn't distort our relationship. But when Victor Castellano started threatening you, that timeline changed. Your safety matters more than my comfort with invisibility. He clicked to the next slide, a comprehensive dossier on Victor Castellano. Financial records, building code violations, documented threats, patterns of harassment. For the past 2 weeks, I've been investigating Victor and positioning resources to not just protect you, but to dismantle his ability to harm anyone else. I've acquired significant debt associated with his properties. I've documented violations that can trigger regulatory action. I've identified his political supporters and funded their opposition. And I prepare a legal strategy that will not only stop his harassment, but force him to face consequences for years of predatory behavior. Teresa, one of the clients, spoke up hesitantly. You're saying you can stop the eviction? You can protect us? I'm saying I could do more than that, Marcus replied. I can force Victor to sell the building to a nonprofit housing trust at fair market value. I can ensure you have secure, affordable housing with proper maintenance and legal protections. And I can make sure Victor faces legal consequences that prevent him from ever doing this to anyone else. Carlos leaned forward. Why would you do this? What do you want from us? I want justice, Marcus said simply. Not just for you, but for every family Victor has exploited. He's operated with impunity for years because he believes wealth makes him untouchable. I'm demonstrating that it doesn't. That predatory behavior has consequences regardless of how much money you have. Janice looked at Naomi, then back at Marcus. You're really a billionaire? Yes, Marcus confirmed. And you've been dating our attorney while working as a security guard? Systems analyst, Marcus corrected with a slight smile. But yes, essentially. The clients processed this information. Then Teresa spoke again. Can we have a moment alone with Miss Taylor? Marcus nodded. He and his team stepped out of the conference room, leaving Naomi alone with her clients. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see them talking intensely. Naomi was explaining something, her hands gesturing emotionally. Her clients were asking questions, offering opinions. After 10 minutes, Naomi opened the door and called Marcus back inside. My clients won't accept your help, Naomi said, her voice professionally controlled. They need protection from Victor's threats, and they deserve justice for what he's done to them. On their behalf, I'm agreeing to the legal strategy you've outlined. And personally? Marcus asked quietly. Naomi's professional composure cracked slightly. Personally, I don't know what I think yet. I need time to process that the man I've been building a relationship with isn't who I thought he was. I'm exactly who you thought I was, Marcus said. I'm the person who listens when you talk about your cases, who celebrates your victories, who believes that justice matters more than profit. The only difference is that I have resources I kept hidden because I needed to know that you were connected with my character rather than my net worth. But that choice wasn't yours to make alone, Naomi said, emotion breaking through. I told you everything about my life, my struggles, my fears, my financial stress. You chose not to tell me the truth about yours. That's not partnership. That's control. The words hit Marcus hard because they were accurate. He'd been so focused on protecting himself from transactional relationships that he created exactly the kind of imbalance he claimed to oppose. You're right, Marcus said. I made a choice that prioritized my need to be known authentically over your right to know who you were dating. That wasn't fair. I'm sorry. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. I love who I thought you were. I don't know yet if I love who you actually are, but my clients need your help, so we're going to work together professionally. After this case is resolved, we can figure out whether there's still a relationship to salvage. Marcus nodded, accepting the boundary. Understood. Let's focus on protecting you and delivering justice. Over the next hour, Marcus's team briefed Naomi and her clients on the comprehensive strategy. The attorney explained the legal approach, using Marcus's acquisition of Victor's debt as leverage to force a sale and filing regulatory complaints that would trigger investigations. The security specialist outlined protection measures, 24/7 security for Naomi and her clients, surveillance detection, documentation of any further threats. The investment officer described the financial structure, how Marcus would facilitate the building's sale to a nonprofit housing trust that would maintain affordability permanently. As they talked, something shifted in the room. Naomi's professional focus took over. She started asking strategic questions, identifying legal complications, contributing ideas that strengthened the plan. Her clients relaxed slightly, beginning to believe that maybe, finally, someone with real power was actually on their side. By the end of the meeting, they had a clear action plan. Marcus's attorney would contact Victor's legal team with an offer, sell the building voluntarily, or face a coordinated legal assault involving debt enforcement, regulatory violations, and criminal harassment charges. The security team would implement protection immediately, and Naomi would coordinate with Marcus's legal team to ensure her clients' interests remained centered throughout the process. As the clients left, escorted by security to their homes, Naomi remained in the conference room with Marcus. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of revelation settling between them. I meant what I said earlier. Naomi finally spoke. I don't know yet if we can rebuild trust, but I want you to understand something. The person I fell in love with was someone who listened, who cared about justice, who showed up consistently. If that person was real, then maybe there's something to salvage. But if that person was just a performance, a role you played while testing me, then we're done. That person was real, Marcus said quietly. The feelings were real. The connection was real. I just kept one part of my life hidden because I'd been hurt before and I was afraid of being seen only for my wealth. I understand being afraid, Naomi replied. But in trying to protect yourself, you created exactly the kind of imbalance you claimed to oppose. You had all the information. I had partial truth. That's not equality. That's not partnership. Marcus absorbed that truth. You're right. And I don't know how to fix it except by being completely honest from now on and accepting whatever consequences come from my choice to hide who I was. Naomi stood up. I need time. Let's focus on stopping Victor and protecting my clients. After that, we can talk about us. She walked to the door, then paused. Marcus, thank you for using your resources to help people who need it. Whatever happens between us personally, I respect that you're willing to deploy your wealth for justice. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with the consequences of choices made to protect himself that had ultimately hurt someone he loved. Victor Castellano's response to Marcus's offer was predictably aggressive. He sent a threatening letter accusing Marcus of harassment through financial manipulation and promising to destroy anyone who interfered with his business operations. It was exactly the kind of arrogant response Marcus had anticipated from someone who'd never faced real consequences for predatory behavior. Marcus's attorney responded with a second letter, this one containing comprehensive documentation of building code violations, evidence of harassment, and notice that Marcus's investment entities were exercising their rights as debt holders to demand immediate payment of outstanding loans. The letter gave Victor 72 hours to simultaneous legal action in multiple jurisdictions. Victor tried to fight. He called in political favors, contacted friendly media outlets, hired additional attorneys. But Marcus had spent 2 weeks building an airtight case, and more importantly, he'd chosen his moments strategically. Victor's financial position was precarious. His political allies were distracted by upcoming elections, and his reputation for predatory behavior meant that even sympathetic contacts were hesitant to defend him publicly. Within 48 hours, Victor's attorneys contacted Marcus requesting a settlement negotiation. Within 96 hours, they'd agreed to terms. Victor would sell the building to a nonprofit housing trust for a fair market value, drop all eviction proceedings immediately, cover moving costs for any tenants who'd already been displaced, and face regulatory investigations without political interference. It was complete capitulation. Victor's empire didn't collapse entirely, but his ability to operate through intimidation was shattered. The investigations revealed patterns of illegal practices across his properties, resulting in fines, mandatory building improvements, and ongoing regulatory oversight. Victor remained wealthy, but his power to harm vulnerable people was significantly diminished. Throughout the process, Marcus and Naomi had worked together with professional efficiency. They coordinated legal strategies, protected her clients, documented everything for regulatory agencies. But their personal relationship remained in suspended animation, cordial but distant, focused on the work rather than their feelings. 3 weeks after the settlement was finalized, Naomi requested a meeting, not at Marcus's office, but at the coffee shop where they'd had their first date. Marcus arrived early, ordered their usual drinks, and waited nervously. When Naomi arrived, she looked tired but relieved. The immediate danger was over. Her clients were safe. Justice had been delivered. But something else was visible in her expression. Something Marcus couldn't quite read. "I've been thinking," Naomi began, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup, "about everything that happened, about your deception, about why you did it, about what it means for us." Marcus listened, not interrupting. "I was angry at first," Naomi continued. "Hurt that you'd kept such a significant truth hidden while I was sharing everything about my life. It felt like a fundamental violation of trust. It was," Marcus acknowledged, "I was so focused on protecting myself from being valued for my wealth that I didn't consider how my secrecy would feel to you. That was selfish." "It was," Naomi agreed, "but I also understand it. After what happened with Vanessa and others who saw you as a transaction rather than a person, your caution makes sense. You were trying to protect something precious, the possibility of being loved for who you are rather than what you have." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "What I've realized is that our relationship had 2 fundamental truths happening simultaneously. First truth, you lied by omission about your wealth. That violated trust. Second truth, everything else about our connection was authentic. Your listening, your support, your values. Those were real." "They were," Marcus confirmed. "The feelings were never fake. I believe you, Naomi said, and I've had to ask myself, can I build a future with someone who started our relationship with significant deception, even if the deception came from understandable self-protection? Marcus's heart was pounding. This was the moment where everything would be decided. My answer, Naomi continued, is that I don't know yet, but I want to try. I want to see if we can rebuild trust through complete honesty going forward. I want to understand your world, the wealth, the responsibility, the complexity of being someone with your resources. And I want you to understand that I'm not interested in being rescued. I'm interested in partnership with someone whose values align with mine. Marcus felt something tight in his chest release. I want that too. Complete honesty. Real partnership. No more hiding. Then we start over. Naomi said, not as strangers, but as people who know the truth about each other and choose to build something new from that foundation. Over the next 6 months, they did exactly that. Marcus showed Naomi his world, not the performative wealth of luxury and status, but the actual work of managing resources responsibly. She attended investment meetings where he evaluated opportunities for social impact. She reviewed his foundation's grant-making process. She challenged his assumptions about what communities needed versus what wealthy benefactors thought they needed. Naomi also maintained her boundaries. When Marcus offered to pay off her student loans, she declined. That's my responsibility, she'd explained. If you want to help, create a loan forgiveness program for public interest lawyers that I can apply to like anyone else. Don't make me a special case because we're dating. Marcus had created that program. $50 million dedicated to supporting public interest attorneys through loan assistance, mental health benefits, and sustainable compensation. Naomi had applied, been accepted based on merit, and received support alongside hundreds of other lawyers committed to justice work. The shift from secrecy to transparency wasn't always easy. Marcus had to learn that honesty sometimes meant uncomfortable conversations. Naomi had to learn that accepting partnership didn't mean compromising her independence. They had arguments about money, about privilege, about the responsibilities that came with wealth, but they had them honestly, working through disagreement rather than avoiding it. The real transformation happened when they started building something together. Using Marcus's resources and Naomi's legal expertise, they created a nonprofit called Justice Collective, an organization that provided legal aid while also addressing the systemic financial barriers that made legal representation unaffordable for most people. Justice Collective didn't just represent clients. It also lobbied for policy changes, funded advocacy campaigns, and created pathways for talented lawyers from underrepresented backgrounds to pursue public interest work without sacrificing financial stability. It was sustainable justice infrastructure rather than charity that required martyrdom. 1 year after Victor's defeat, Naomi and Marcus stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for affordable housing in the building where her clients had faced illegal eviction. The building had been fully renovated, operated by a nonprofit trust, and provided permanent affordable homes for 80 families. Teresa, Carlos, and Janice were all there, not just as tenants, but as members of the building's resident council, helping make decisions about their community's future. They'd gone from facing homelessness to having security and agency, and they'd been central to every decision about the building's renovation and operations. During the ceremony, Teresa spoke. "A year ago, we were terrified. We were facing eviction from the only home we had. Naomi fought for us, but she was fighting alone against someone with unlimited resources and no conscience." Then Marcus showed up, not as a savior, but as someone who believed that wealth should serve justice instead of exploiting vulnerability. She paused, looking at the renovated building with visible emotion. This building used to represent everything wrong with our system. An owner willing to break laws to maximize profit. A legal system that moved slowly while families face homelessness. But it also represents something beautiful. What becomes possible when someone with real power chooses to use it for accountability instead of accumulation. Naomi squeezed Marcus's hand. Their journey from hidden truth to shared purpose had been complicated, but standing here, seeing real families with secure homes, watching their lawyer and her partner work together for justice, felt like vindication of the hard work it had taken to rebuild trust. But the story didn't stop there. The success of Victor's defeat and the creation of Justice Collective had attracted attention from foundations, philanthropists, and policymakers. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't just invisible anymore. He was becoming visible as something new, a billionaire deploying wealth for systemic justice rather than personal accumulation. He'd given interviews about his philosophy of investing in justice infrastructure. He'd published articles about why sustainable change required addressing both individual actors and systemic barriers. He'd testified before Congress about the role of capital in perpetuating inequality and the responsibility of wealthy people to address it. Naomi had watched this public emergence with careful attention. "You're becoming visible again," she'd observed one evening as they worked through grant proposals for Justice Collective. "How does it feel?" "Different," Marcus had replied. "Before, I was hiding because I was afraid of being reduced to my wealth. Now I'm visible, but on my own terms, not as a celebrity billionaire, but as someone with resources who understands their responsibility to deploy those resources thoughtfully." "That's wisdom," Naomi had said. "You're not pretending money doesn't matter. You're being clear about what it should matter for." 18 months after Victor's defeat, Marcus and Naomi made a quiet decision. They got married, not a lavish celebrity event, but an intimate ceremony attended by close friends, family, and the clients whose lives have been transformed through Justice Collective's work. Victor Castellano attended the wedding, along with her 3 clients, David Park, the system's analyst friend who'd helped document Victor's violations, and dozens of people whose lives had been touched by the work they were building together. During the reception, something unexpected happened. Victor Castellano approached them. He looked diminished somehow, not physically, but in his bearing. The confidence that had characterized him before had been replaced by something that resembled genuine shame. "I wanted to apologize," Victor said to both of them, "for the threats, for the harassment, for everything I did to intimidate people who were simply standing up for their rights." Marcus and Naomi exchanged a glance. This wasn't something they'd anticipated. "Losing my power was humiliating," Victor continued, "but it also forced me to see what I'd been doing. I wasn't just breaking laws. I was destroying lives to maximize profit. And I convinced myself that was normal, that everyone operated that way." He looked directly at Marcus. "I hated you for forcing me to face that, but I'm grateful now, because I've had time to understand that wealth without conscience is just theft wearing a business suit. What will you do now?" Naomi asked carefully. "I'm liquidating my remaining properties," Victor said, "selling them to nonprofit housing trusts at below market rates. I'm establishing a fund to help people I've displaced rebuild their lives. And I'm working with therapists to understand the character failures that led to my behavior." He paused. "I know actions matter more than words. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just acknowledging that you were right, that accountability has to come before redemption, and that genuine change requires confronting what we've done wrong." After Victor left, Naomi looked at Marcus. "Do you think he means it?" "I think he's beginning to," Marcus replied. "Whether it lasts depends on whether he continues choosing accountability when nobody's watching. But at least he started that journey." "That's more than I would have expected," Naomi admitted. "People don't usually respond to having power removed by choosing genuine reflection. Most people aren't forced to confront it," Marcus said. "When consequences are real and inescapable, some people choose to grow rather than just suffer." 2 years after Marcus's revelation, Justice Collective had expanded into 5 cities. They'd helped over 3,000 clients while simultaneously advocating for policy changes that addressed the systemic barriers facing poor and working-class communities. They created the loan forgiveness program for public interest lawyers, established a fellowship program for talented attorneys from underrepresented backgrounds, and built a sustainable model for legal aid that didn't require martyrdom. Naomi had been promoted to executive director, leading a team of 50 lawyers and support staff. Marcus remained largely behind the scenes, managing the foundation's finances, identifying investment opportunities, ensuring that resources were deployed strategically. They'd learned to separate their personal partnership from their professional collaboration, creating clear boundaries that allowed them to work together without personal dynamics distorting mission-critical decisions. The most powerful moment came during Justice Collective's 2-year anniversary celebration. They'd invited everyone touched by their work, clients who'd received legal representation, community members who'd benefited from policy advocacy, lawyers who'd found sustainable careers through their fellowship program. David Park, Marcus's friend from the nonprofit think tank, spoke about what he'd observed. 2 years ago, Marcus was invisible by choice. He was hiding his wealth because he'd been hurt by transactional relationships. Naomi was visible but isolated, fighting for justice with limited resources against opponents with unlimited power. Then they found each other, and instead of that relationship becoming another site of deception or transaction, it became the foundation for something bigger. He paused. What they built isn't just legal aid. It's a model for how wealth can serve justice without dominating it, how power can be deployed without extracting, how transformation can happen when visibility, resources, and commitment to justice come together. During her remarks, Naomi reflected on the journey from that first coffee date to building Justice Collective. I met Marcus when he was pretending to be powerless, and I married him now that he's learning to wield power responsibly. The transition between those two realities wasn't easy. It required confronting what his invisibility had hidden and what his visibility was revealing. She looked at Marcus. What I've learned is that authenticity isn't about transparency on every topic. It's about aligning your actions with your values. Marcus kept his wealth hidden because he was protecting his ability to be known authentically. That was flawed reasoning that created real harm. But once he understood the harm, he committed to aligning his actions, his choices about deployment of wealth, his willingness to be visible about his responsibility, with his values of justice and accountability. That's what matters, not whether you hide or reveal, but whether you're continuously choosing alignment between your stated values and your actual behavior. Marcus spoke last, and his words were careful, considered. 2 years ago, I believed that invisibility was the only way to be known authentically. I was wrong. What I've learned is that authenticity requires integration, bringing together all the parts of who we are and being transparent about them. I had wealth. I had power. I had resources that could serve justice. I was choosing to hide all of that because I was afraid of being reduced to those things. But in hiding them, I was actually making myself unavailable to the people who needed those resources most. Naomi needed protection from someone threatening her. Her clients needed legal resources to fight predatory behavior. Communities needed capital to build affordable housing. And I was withholding all of that because I wanted to be known without my wealth being part of that knowing. What I understand now is that wealth is part of who I am. It's not all of who I am, but it's not something I get to hide. The question isn't whether to hide or reveal wealth. The question is what you do with it. Do you use it to extract and accumulate? Or do you use it to serve justice and build equity? For me, the answer has become clear. I want to use whatever resources I have, financial, intellectual, relational, to create systems where people like Teresa, Carlos, and Janice don't have to choose between legal representation and paying rent, where people like Naomi can pursue justice work without sacrificing financial security, where wealth serves something bigger than its own accumulation. 3 years after the revelation, Marcus and Naomi welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Justice, knowing the name carried weight and intention. Marcus had stepped back from public visibility somewhat, focused on being present as a father while continuing to manage the foundation and Justice Collective's financial strategy. He still worked from the modest penthouse apartment that had started all of this, the space where he'd lived invisibly while accumulating billions. But now it was filled with different energy. A partner who knew who he was and chose to be with him anyway. A child learning that wealth could be a tool for creating justice rather than a shield for avoiding accountability. A life integrated rather than compartmentalized. On their daughter's first birthday, Naomi and Marcus hosted a celebration. They invited everyone who'd been part of their journey. Her 3 clients who now lived in permanently affordable housing, the lawyers they'd hired to their fellowship program, the communities they'd served, the people they'd worked with to hold Victor accountable. During the celebration, Naomi pulled Marcus aside. "I want to tell you something," she said. "I was angry at you for hiding who you were. That anger was justified, but I'm grateful for what came from it. Not the deception, but the growth that followed." "I'm grateful too," Marcus replied, for you not accepting my invisibility as an excuse, for pushing me to integrate all the parts of who I am, for building something that's bigger than us and our relationship. That's what love is, Naomi said. Not just connection between two people, but the willingness to be transformed together into something that serves something beyond yourselves. Marcus kissed her, and their daughter laughed from her playpen, a sound of pure joy that represented everything they'd built together. The story of Marcus and Naomi didn't end with revelation and reconciliation. It continued into something more complex and profound, a partnership where both visibility and invisibility served justice, where wealth was deployed thoughtfully, where love had been tested and deepened through truth-telling and accountability. They still faced challenges. Marcus still struggled sometimes with the visibility he'd chosen, still caught himself wanting to hide his wealth to protect his sense of self. Naomi still navigated the complexity of being married to a billionaire while maintaining her own independence and vision for their work. But they navigated those challenges transparently, with commitment to integration rather than compartmentalization. Justice Collective continued expanding, served tens of thousands of people, and became a model for how legal aid could be both sustainable and transformative. Naomi published extensively about the intersection of wealth, justice, and systemic change. Marcus served on boards, funded scholarships, and worked to shift how philanthropic capital was deployed toward equity rather than charity. And somewhere in Brooklyn, in a penthouse that looked unremarkable from the outside but was filled with love, partnership, and integrated purpose, a billionaire who'd learned to be visible and a lawyer who demanded honesty built a life that proved something profound. Authentic connection can survive revelation if both people choose growth over defensiveness. Before you go, I want to know, what city are you watching the story from? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening to this tale of hidden wealth, revealed identity, and love that survives truth. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to join our community. We share stories about people who found each other across boundaries of wealth and visibility, about relationships tested by deception but deepened by accountability, about using power to serve justice instead of extracting value. New episodes drop weekly, and each one reminds us that the most powerful transformations happen when visibility, resources, and commitment to justice come together. Subscribe now, and don't miss a single story of love, revelation, and the courage to build something bigger than yourself.